I grew up in a very small town, about 280 people. If you wanted to get anything done, from ambulance service to recreation center to the rodeo or anything like that, you had to do it. In fact, the ambulance service was usually Dad's station wagon, and we'd drive up to the hospital, which Dad had a hand in building. So it was always in my experience that if you wanted something, you had to step forward and do it. So I served on conservation districts, served on school boards, and I finally got to the point where I thought, you know, Congress isn't getting anything done. I'm gonna run. Didn't win, which is probably a good thing, because sort of sat on my laurels for a bit, and then ended up being treasurer, and finally deciding to be governor. But it's always been with that same spirit of, if you want to get something done, you know, politics is a good way to be able to work together to solve problems that people need solved. So that was my experience.
I think it's interesting that you talk about your upbringing and your family, because I do think that you can get a really strong foundation where it's more of a calling. I grew up in a household with a really sick sister, so my parents were navigating healthcare, and she blew through all of her caps on her insurance before she was 3 and required significant health care. And so watching my parents both step up, as you said, and do the work themselves and make a difference, but seeing that government could do much more to solve the problems of everyday individuals really inspired me to go a step further than doing the work for my sister that was so important and life-saving, but to be able to be in a position to do that for everyone else. And I ended up right out of law school working for seniors and helping them navigate, frankly, healthcare and long-term care. And I had an interesting segue into state government. I wanted to help, and I wanted to participate with the aging department, and I got short shrift. They were not interested in any of my ideas, and I thought, well, maybe I should do that job. And I've never looked back. So I was a cabinet secretary for 18 years. I did the same thing. I wanted to work on healthcare for Congress. I ran, I didn't win. Then I ran for a local office and I won. Then I ran for Congress and I won. And then governors really can make a measurable impact. And I'm very lucky that I get to do this job, and every time someone says, I have free childcare, I have housing, I have free college, I have a job, you're building an energy economy, I feel really good about the decisions I'm making, and I hope we inspire more people to do more of the same.
Yeah, I do too, because I think both of us probably come at this a little bit differently, which is appropriate. You know, you talk a lot about government's ability to be able to solve problems, and in my interest is how do we get government a little bit out of the way so that it only provides those things that are really necessary. And yet I think both of us are trying to figure out how to make that person's life better.
Right, and I think that gets to where the commonality always is. Government should be efficient and effective.
Absolutely.
That's a model that people want and deserve.
Yeah. And
that, I think, is a universal application of leadership that's productive in any of these jobs.
Yes. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I've really enjoyed getting to know you and understand a little bit more.
Not everyone feels that way.
Well, that's true here too. But you know, it's we're both on either side of Colorado. Good Lord, that's a terrible place.
That binds us.
Yeah, right.
Is when Western governors, it's a race to the top.
Yeah.
It is exactly the model for the country.
Yeah.
Because we compete productively, bringing good ideas and problem-solving skills that are unique enough to meet our own state's requirements and our constituents to meet them where they are. Right. But to also create models where the federal government and more states can take that design. And so we tease about Colorado a ton because in many ways Colorado's got, particularly on water issues, we need really strong bipartisan partnerships here, and we get them.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned the federal government, because all Western states have a tremendous amount of federal land. So our biggest, landowner in Wyoming is the federal government, and the way they look at things is sometimes not particularly agreeable, and it's sometimes very difficult. And in our particular case, we have this checkerboard pattern, which was a legacy, I guess, of the Civil War and kind of westward expansion, where we have a section of land that is federally owned, a section of land that is maybe state owned, and another section of land which is private, and trying to figure out how to manage across all of that with a big behemoth in the East that has their own ideas, sometimes can be really complicated. And I think that's what's been really a great opportunity working with you, sharing some of those same issues.
Same thing. Sovereign nations, we have with the 5th largest state in terms of landmass, and literally the state also, as a landholder, has millions and millions of acres.
Yeah.
And so navigating that, and you need a partner who shares your vision, and it's not sometimes unique enough to meet the vision of a particular state. So when we work together, we create a block of states that I think present really good case scenarios for better stewardship and better private sector engagement. It's one of my favorite things about Western governors, is really understanding the land and the people here.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that we all kind of wrestle with, particularly more pronounced recently, is whenever there's a change of administration.
Is there going to be a change in administration?
We'll see. But whenever there is, and I say this recently because, we used to sort of go Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Democrat, Republican, Republican, that sort of thing, and there'd be some sense of continuity. But recently, that's been so dramatic, the changes, and a lot of the policies that are put in place by one administration immediately get taken out by the next. And for the businesses and the communities and the people of our states, they still are there. They're still trying to make a living. They're still trying to make sure their kids go to school, have good educations, et cetera. But you have these massive swings on the federal level, which is a big issue for our states and how we run things.
I think it's an interesting challenge that the country should be talking more about. I know that the easy debate for Congress, given that I served 3 terms, is you need term limits. That's an easy place to go, and certainly there's lots more there in terms of an effective deep dive on that topic. But when you have massive swings in Congress too, with no ability to get the kind of seniority and to become an expert in a particular area, is also incredibly challenging. So we have to create more balance, predictability, and certainty. And it's something I do think that governors can demonstrate, and our relationships last far beyond our terms, and the impacts of our working together last far beyond our terms, and lifts the very people who depend on us to do that up.
Yeah, absolutely. And the term limits thing is always interesting to me too, because
given that I have some.
Yeah. Well, I do too. But I served as treasurer and kind of came in with the idea to the governor's position with the idea of that I've been here, I know how this goes, and yet, even just figuring out where the bathroom was kind of complicated, much more complicated than I ever thought it would be. And the problem, I think, with term limits is you have people who come in completely fresh. This is especially true, I think, of Washington. Mm-hmm. I served on the Kansas City Federal Reserve for a while, and Tom Honig went back to D.C. He was our chairman, our president, and he took his own crew with him because he said, if I show up in D.C., I'm going to be immediately surrounded with people who are embedded and have been there forever, and it'll be hard to make a difference.
You can argue that either way,
Sure.
And that's why these conversations are valuable.
Yeah. Well, my initiative has been decarbonizing the West. It was a topic I didn't really choose the title, But the issue of climate change is a big one, and particularly big in the West. We talked a little bit about people's lives that are about to be turned over. In fact, you and I had an opportunity, both in front of Congress and in front of the White House, to talk about quote unquote transition. It's not as simple as people say it is, and it's particularly challenging for our states. The issue for me has always been what is CO2 in the atmosphere going to do? Is that changing the climate? If it is, then let's talk about that. But let's not talk about it in terms of whatever you've been doing, we don't want you doing anymore. Mostly people we don't know. How many people know coal miners? You know, so we'll code them. We'll teach them coding, and they'll be happy. Which you and I both know that doesn't work. Jobs don't pay the same. So the issue was, how do we address CO2 in the atmosphere? And it turns out we have all these great technologies. Plus the things that we do. Our farmers and ranchers can be able to sequester that. Better management of the soil, better management of our forests. We can do carbon sequestration. Yes, it's going to be expensive. So is renewable energy. All of this is going to take a little bit of cost, but we want to make sure that people feel a sense of moving forward, a sense of progress, a sense of betterment in that. And so that was really the impetus for my project, was to redefine the conversation in the West, because we have Western coastal states that are putting demands on the resources which are mostly in our neck of the woods, the central part of the country, and to really redefine it as not so much let's stop all that stuff, but let's make the opportunity set bigger and address climate at the same time. So it's been really exciting because we've expanded all of these different technologies, all of the above, talked about ag and ag's opportunities. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to open the first new modular advanced nuclear power plant. It'd be exciting, no carbon footprint, TerraPower, in a community that is really dependent on coal. We don't want that to go away, but at the same time, bringing on a new technology that can continue to power is exciting. Huge workforce, tiny little town, huge workforce. So that was my agenda.
It doesn't quite segue in the way I think maybe some viewers in terms of my project, but something that your leadership as chair that I think is very valuable to talk about is we're going to see on the national stage again a debate about climate change. For me, my perspective, we shouldn't be debating that anymore. It's real and we should be doing everything about it. The way in which you created energy as a source of initiative for all states that went from workforce to reliability to solving climate changes, to solving the crisis, to making sure you're engaging your water users and your food growers. These things translate to every single state, and certainly in the West, where it's getting hotter. Drought is the new norm. We don't have sufficient water supply. We're battling the worst wildfires in the history of the United States. We're seeing that play out around the world. This requires a whole lot more action without political debate.
Right.
Now, I see a role for the political debate. That's my end, about making sure that more Americans understand the climate crisis and what causes that, particularly since I'm a lead oil and gas state. But where we all need to be working better, faster, is in transition of cleaner power for all Americans. And your initiative did that, and it created a really good segue for my initiative, which is affordable housing. We don't have it for a growing workforce. The American dream has slipped away, whether you're focusing on the growing workforce challenges that we have, or that young people can't afford housing for the first time ever in the United States, whether that's owning or renting. But we can't deal with our risks, like the growing homelessness situation, without transitional and effective housing supply. In New Mexico alone, we need 40,000 new units. And in addition, the federal government is helpful in making sure there are investments, and not so helpful in a one-size-fits-all approach, which has really slowed development. I'm very excited about this initiative. I think it's a national problem, and I think with all of the public lands in Western states, we can develop models for both, and to your point, energy efficient housing, which is where we started a lot of our conservation work in energy in the United States. I think it's a place we can continue to build, pardon the pun, and I think that we can really move the needle here. So we're supporting your workforce efforts and initiatives, and we're creating opportunities for young people and working Americans all across the USA. So I'm excited about that initiative, and I no doubt I'll be leaning on you even more for making sure that we turn that dial up, if you will. This is where we want more heat. Turn the heat up on getting more housing built around the country.
Well, and you know, I'm sure New Mexico, I know certainly true of Wyoming, we want to be able to have our kids either stay or come back. To your point, affordable starter homes are absolutely essential. And that's what I love about Western governors, is we can share these issues, and look at ways that we can solve them. And that's what's always been great about working with you, the different perspective, the different tools that we can bring to bear. But you know, I think you did a great job of pointing out that it's not just housing, it's not just energy, it's also the states that we live in, and our commitments to making sure there's a good balance in how we proceed, so that we understand that we have valuable wildlife resources. I know migration corridors are something that you're looking at. We certainly have done that in Wyoming. We did that respecting private property rights and expanding it. And that's what's been great to have the partnership from, and I hate the term across the aisle, but partnerships with different perspectives to try to figure out how we make sure the West is as special going forward for our kids that we want to live there, be able to afford living there, as it is and has been for us. Yeah,
absolutely. And your point about sometimes government can be in the way. For housing like energy, it's far too complicated, and there are so many people involved. Certainly, I'm not suggesting that we don't have people involved, but when permitting in a locality, particularly where we are today, other high tourist locations like Santa Fe, New Mexico, if it takes 5 years to get a local permit to build, we will never catch up. Now, that should not equate to reckless, poor quality, that we don't have a vision for livability in our communities. And you said it, the West is spectacular. And these views and open spaces are part of what we cherish. These are not things that have to be mutually exclusive in making one decision or another. You can make a decision that creates opportunity for all of those things to be considered. But stalling out, particularly here, is not an option for any of our states. And I look forward to making sure that my grandchildren know unequivocally that when they're ready to rent or own, they'll have a pathway to do that wherever they choose. And certainly I hope it's in the backyard in New Mexico somewhere.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to your point about how long it takes to get things done, there's an urgency to all of this stuff.
That's right.
There's an urgency to the housing, to the jobs, to figuring out how to power our nation. And if you have to, in the case of Wyoming, we had a wind farm that took 12 years to get permitting in place. Right. Spanned 3 different administrations. If you have the fluctuations we talked about, you know, we're not going to get that done. And we're really shooting ourselves in the foot. So there has to be, I think, a combined effort. And I come back to saying that's where governors make a difference. Because, you know, governors can't sort of hide behind rhetoric. They actually have to deliver. I know I hear on a regular basis from my constituents about what I've delivered and what I haven't delivered, sometimes pretty fiercely. But the point is that governors can get things done, and in fact, we ought to have much more of a important role for governors to play, because I know you and I have talked about this for a long time. Governors don't feature much in DC. They ought to, because we're the ones that are really the best barometers for what's happening.
Fair enough, and it's why we promote so effectively the Western Governors Association. Big enough that huge population base with incredible opportunities and challenges both, but also a uniqueness in that sort of get things done and get beyond if there is a difference, and there often is, and get in front of the things that keep us working together.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. We are looking at our nominees, and both of us working hard to put our thumbprint, if you will, on either the continuation of an administration or a change in administration, and that's clear. But I do think what we hope from this PBS set of questions and interviews is Western governors ought to be in the focal point for Americans, and typically where they see us serving is, and we have Secretary Holland from New Mexico. We've had many folks from Colorado and New Mexico and Colorado and the western states in that position, including a relative of mine, a Republican, Manuel Lujan, in the Bush administration. And that's powerful, but it should be expanded in so many other ways. And frankly, if you think about the major challenges of the U.S., so transportation, decarbonization, growing our own food, FEMA, wildfires, climate crisis, housing, water, healthcare in rural areas.
Absolutely.
When we do it right, it is a model for the rest of the country. When we can make it affordable, it's a model for the rest of the country. So I think part of our job is to encourage more incredibly talented individuals to not only think about being a governor, but to think about their role in continuing to put our country on a productive path for all Americans. And that's something I think we can all share.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you on that. One of
We're
the
just
things,
not as visible as Florida, Texas, New York, and California.
Well, it's true.
I mean, that's an issue.
It is. It is. To me, one of the things that in my lifetime seems to have changed dramatically is the focus and emphasis on Washington. If you looked at Washington, D.C. During the 1980s, there wasn't much going on there. It was kind of a rundown town, and there weren't that many lobbyists.
I like
there.
that you say 1980s, because I was really young in 1980.
But now it's got a bigger GDP than New York City. It's the highest GDP, and I keep thinking, why is that? There's so much attention on the president, and if you look back at our history, and of course this is me being a Republican, I believe in government closest to the people, and I think that's where states are. I think that's where counties are, because we can be more responsive, more flexible, and so I don't know if there's a current governor that might think about it, or a Western personality that might think about president. Certainly Doug Burgum tried, but to your point, you know, North Dakota's a pretty small place up there.
Gary Johnson from New Mexico,
well, Gary Johnson,
Bill Richardson from.
Yeah.
So it's not like nobody runs,
Right.
But
right.
it's a heavy lift.
Right.
But if we can inspire by our work,
Right.
more folks to look at all of the different leadership styles across the country and the impact that Western governors have and its affinity for problem solving in a number of ways around the country. That's valuable, certainly for us. And I think about if we had a Western governor, given the fact that we work so well together, that we like each other, and respect each other. You need both of those things.
Yeah.
I think to truly have a meaningful, deep relationship that inspires you to want to work together all the time. I think if you had a block of Western governors in a bipartisan fashion that had more affinity towards what's happening or not happening in DC, and I think it might create more faith and credibility about the political process for more Americans.
And I think it's also clear that we're not going to agree on everything. I know, Governor Polis.
No matter how hard I try.
Yeah, I know. I know, you remind me of my sister.
They like your sister.
Yeah, right. But I think also the other thing is just the friendships that we have and how important that is. And I think we've forgotten that in our political discourse. I remember Easter a couple of years ago, you called up with the most impossible mission anybody could ever think of. It's snowing, nobody could drive in Wyoming, and you call up asking for delivery.
3 Angora baby bunnies. And I need them delivered in 5 days to New Mexico. You have to drive them. And actually, my request really was, shouldn't you get in the car and come see me for Easter and bring me these bunnies for my grandchildren? And what people should know is you delivered on your end and created a seamless way to get those bunnies for an Easter gift for my grandkiddos. And then we had a little problem arise, and I got the bunnies anyway. And for people who might hear this story, Operation Rabbit Delivery, what did you call
Operation
it?
Bunny Drop.
Bunny Drop.
It was military.
It was military.
Yeah.
I still have my Angora. I ended up with lion head rabbits. I have 24 chickens, 2 goats, 2 Brazilian pheasants, 3 rabbits, 4 dogs, and a cat, all at the governor's house. So we're a family that when you whether you raise animals for food or they're pets, they belong to your family, you're responsible for them.
Absolutely.
And my kiddos put those little bunnies, now they're big rabbits, on harnesses and walk them around. So it's pretty funny. And but you recognized I'm a grandmother and a mother, that I care about my family, that these holidays are important and special, and those deeper relationships create powerful connections that last a lifetime, and I think they are valuable.
Absolutely. That's what our country was made from. I think those disagreements, yes, but friendships and always the ability to talk.
Fair enough. Here's to another several productive Western governors' years.
Absolutely.
There's nothing better than making a difference.
Yeah.
It is the most powerful, palpable. So every time someone's frustrated, or even as long as they're appropriate in their frustration, a little bit of anger, because it's impatience, but not hostility, making a difference for someone who recognizes that you've made life-changing decisions. But we need in this country to stop vilifying every decision and second-guessing what the motivations are, and letting our frustrations create the kind of hostility and animosity that's hateful and destructive and dangerous. And we need young people who say no to that and rededicate themselves that public service is the highest calling, and we should all be working towards our own individual roles in that aspect. But we need to do something about the increasingly dangerous rhetoric and the temperature about American politics today, because it's quite chilling. I can say unequivocally, I've got family members. They used to tease that in Congress there are 3 parties: the Republicans, the Democrats, and the Lujans. And so my family has a long, rich history in public service. New Mexico's a small state. My family's been there for 400 years, like so many other New Mexicans. And when you're talking about a sovereign nation, it's time immemorial. It's thousands and thousands of years. And my kids want no part of this because they find it terrifying and too angry, and that has to be eroded. And the sooner, the better. And we need more people to aspire to do this work so that that can be attenuated.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. And I love the term public service, because it's not a public career, it's a public service. And I've always looked at it that way. And to your point about the ability to get something done, you can get that done at the local level. So I think people today need to be engaged in what's happening in their community, whether it be running for the city council, whether it be a commissioner, whether it be school board, whether it be the cemetery board. These are all incredibly valuable, probably more impactful than anything that the president is going to do, and you can make a difference. And if you don't get involved, if you're not willing to step forward and try to attenuate all this rhetoric, all the anger and everything else, we're going to live with it, and it's going to be more destructive and more disruptive to our lives, and we're going to see bigger swings back and forth. I think being engaged, remembering that it is a service and not a career.
America's
critical.
superpower is
Yeah.
that we were all engaged
That's exactly
in some
right.
way.
Yeah.
Very different. I mean, we're not, and that's the beauty of America. We're not a homogenous set of individuals. We are all very different. But everyone was engaged in some way, and with
Right.
the internet and so many other risks, disengagement, I think, for our country is very dangerous. And so I hope we've inspired folks to think about ways that right now they can make a difference in their neighborhoods, their cities and communities, and their states and their country. And more of that is absolutely a good thing.
Yeah, America's strength has always been the willingness to step forward.
And our diversity.
And our diversity.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I do like you.